Here we go again. It is Orange and Blue today, presented by Champ Honda. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. Training camp preview continues in the cornerback position. You know the big names, and there's a name you're going to need to know, nerd to know. We're going to nerd out on a
We're
name
gonna
you
nerd
need to
out, so you
know.
need to know. Yes,
Exactly.
that's the
Yeah.
key thing.
We
But yeah,
are
you say
here.
yeah. Here we go. I mean, here we go again.
Yes.
But not on our own. But cornerbacks are a little like drifters. They were born to walk alone because
Yes.
sometimes, even though Vance Joseph's defense is not the same as it was the last time he was here, sometimes you're going to see those good cornerbacks left on an island.
Mm-hmm. That's
There
right.
they go
And
again. And they're going to be okay with that. At least
and
one will.
we'll be sliding around on the hoods of cars. It's a White Snake reference, everybody. But let's talk about Surtain Island. Can we call it Surtain Island? I mean, I'm expecting other corners to get a lot of activity their way because if you go at Pat Surtain with this aggressive, changing Vance Joseph defense, he's going to confuse you. You're going to try to throw it at Surtain. He's going to make you pay.
He will. And really, aside from not even a 2-week hiccup, really like it was like a game and a quarter hiccup that he had during the 2022 season, earned his first team all pro nod. And I'll be frank, I guess I could be Mace, but I'll be Mace and I'll be frank. And I'll say that
Not when I'm drinking.
I know you were begging to make the response. Can I be frank?
Can
Okay,
I be made?
can I still be Garth?
Right. Can I still be Garth?
But anyway. To me, Pat Surtain is not only CB1 on this team, but CB1 in this league among the young corners. I'd rather have him than Sauce Gardner. He does not grab as much. He's going to have opportunities to make plays, but just how many? I mean, I would say with PS2, those chances are probably going to be clustered in games where you've got QBs who maybe are a little bit less than savvy. I think, for example, and we even saw this. We saw this in 2021. We saw this in 2022. You saw, for example, in 2021, Joe Burrow basically give up on trying to throw at Pat Surtain as the game went on, basically eliminating Jamar Chase from the equation. You don't see Patrick Mahomes throw at Pat Surtain much, if at all. You're going to need, if we're going to be looking up and seeing some explosive game-breaking plays from Surtain beyond just taking one side off the field for an opposing quarterback, you're hoping that they come in games like Week 2, Washington, Sam Howell expected to make his third career start. Week 4 at Chicago, Justin Fields still developing and learning, because let's face it, when you face Mahomes, probably when you face Aaron Rodgers as well, Justin Herbert has learned the hard way. Don't throw at Surtain. I mean, look last year when the Broncos went out to L.A., how often he was throwing at Damari Mathis. Some of that was because Damari was making his first career start, but some of that was also he wasn't going to throw on Surtain Island.
Yeah. It's not a smart proposition. We know Sam Howell, you and I appreciate his game, but he loves hero ball. So you get some of those guys playing hero ball, or some of those young quarterbacks developing, like they'll take a chance and they'll get burned. And Surtain does a great job of making players look open. He's open. He's playing trail technique, and it'll be like, the guy's open. Come on, you see him. And then they make the throw, and then Surtain rights in and gets the ball.
Suckers you into it.
Yes.
And we see it time and time again. But the question for quarterbacks is, do you learn from that? I think we certainly saw Justin Herbert learn from that. We'll see others, but it was similar with Champ Bailey. I mean, Champ would always make a cluster of plays against younger quarterbacks. I remember late in the 06 season, for example, he has a pick six off of Matt Leinart in Arizona. He has a pick six off of Alex Smith. It's weird to think of these guys being young quarterbacks. Man, time flies, doesn't it? But
it does.
That's why if you're looking at Surtain and you know, don't get caught up with the interceptions, don't get caught up with the big plays. But I think they're going to be there, but they're going to be there in very specific matchups more so than other times.
The difference you're going to see in this Broncos defense, I believe, is one, the offense is going to put up a fight and force opponents to do a little bit more. I think you are going to see more defensive plays and maybe scores from this Broncos, because Broncos defense has always been strong. But do not dare have cornerback envy. You've got the best in the league in Pat Surtain and Mace. We remember Champ would have, the game against T.O. I think there was a game against Chad Johnson one time. Like, so Champ would have those game and a half, whatever, but didn't happen too much on the calendar.
Yeah, it doesn't. And so don't get too kind of caught up in that. But I'll tell you this, week 1, if you're setting up matchups and you got Pat Surtain on Devontae Adams right there, that's going to be an interesting test as well. And we'll see if Jimmy Garoppolo chooses to throw in his direction or not. That's right. Going to be interesting to watch. So we'll actually come right out in week 1 and we'll see. And it's a chance for Surtain to get some redemption as well, because there he was, struggling late against Devontae Adams. I don't, he was only partially at fault for that overtime touchdown. It was, kind of a team coverage breakdown there against the Raiders last November. But he's going to come out in week 1, I think, looking for a little atonement there. So that too is something to watch for what I think for the Broncos is going to be a very winnable game. But we're spending all this time gushing about Pat Surtain, and he's the known commodity. The thing to watch here is going to be what goes on beyond that. And you got K'Wan Williams, who's the slot corner, and he has a history over the years of being used in pass rush. And that's something he did very effectively in San Francisco. And I think you're going to see the Broncos play to that strength. That's really kind of all we can say at this point about that.
Right.
But on the other side, Damari Mathis came along last year, but I don't think he's got the job on lockdown just yet. I think he's the favorite to start opposite Pat Surtain, but I don't think we're putting his name in Sharpie just yet.
Yeah, and we know what K'Wan can do in his spot, and opposite of Surtain should be Mathis. I appreciate Mathis's game because he's always been tough and physical and aggressive, and he's got a short memory. You mentioned the first game when he got torched. Didn't see him get torched much after that.
Yep.
But there is it's like professional wrestling, right? Where there's somebody new coming into the arena, like, oh my God, who is it? Someone new coming to the ring. Like, there's someone else that I think could push Damari Mathis for that job. Doesn't mean Mathis isn't, a fine young player on the way up, but the Broncos have another fine young player on the way up, caught our attention and then some this offseason.
Yep. As Yoda would say, there is another, and his name is Ja'Quan McMillian. And if you were paying attention in week 18 against the Chargers, you saw him make his debut. And this guy, man, gives no quarter, plays with a tenacity and a feistiness that you like. He's a little bit undersized, but he makes up for that with, I think, not only with technique, but I think he also makes up for it with, like I said, I think the word is tenacity. You'll probably see him get called for some penalties because he's going to get in there. He's going to do some hand fighting. But, this is a guy who, if he gets beat, he's got good closing speed. He catches up. He doesn't get beat very often as well. He's extremely tough for receivers to shake, as we saw out there in OTAs. And looks like the next undrafted steal potentially in Broncos country who ends up developing. I mean, I don't want to gush too much based on OTAs, but man, this dude looked good out there.
When we see it, we see it. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not going to say Chris Harris, although there is some Chris Harris to his game, mainly the feistiness. Like, you just
got
leave
the
me
dog
alone.
in him. He's got
annoying.
the dog in him. We
Yes,
love seeing that.
So when you see it, and this is the great thing, because I can't stand Mace. I'll keep this somewhat brief, but I can't stand when people are like, it's just preseason, it doesn't matter. I'm like, it does matter. When it's OTAs, it's just practice. They don't have pads, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Because when you see a guy like McMillian making those plays and the way that he's making plays, he sticks in people's back pockets and he won't go away and he won't back down. there could be something there. And Broncos fans, you're going to get to know his name.
Yeah, this is a guy that if he comes out there and camp, makes a couple plays that jump out, this is a guy that I could see fans falling in love with as they get to know him and watch him play. He's got that. He's got that energy to him. He's got that aura to him. And, and I think the way I would say it is he carries himself as much bigger than his frame would indicate. Like he's got the attitude to him. And I think you and I have seen that enough over the years where we know how to recognize it when it's there and we get excited when we see it. So I'll tell you what, like he was one of the revelations of OTAs because we did see him last year, but that last game, I mean, you've got guys that, got a lot of guys that are stepping in. One of the traditions of week 18 is that if your team's out of it, you got a bunch of guys going on injured reserve. If there's any doubts, so the roster ends up looking somewhat like a preseason game at times.
Right.
But those preseason reps can matter for a guy trying to prove himself. And Ja'Quan McMillian, to his credit, took those reps. And this is where continuity does help on the coaching staff. We talked about it in the defensive line show when you had Marcus Dixon coming back and how much that helped Enia Wazirike and Matt Henningsen because they can just build off of the equity that they've gained over the first year with their position coach. Well, the same is true when you got Christian Parker in the defensive backfield. And so, it'll help Damari Mathis. It'll help Ja'Quan McMillian. Those guys, they're not starting from zero. They are working under a coach who's seen them work up close for a year and can get in there and advocate for them in those position group meetings. And by and large, because I think Vance Joseph and Sean Payton are going to listen to what Christian Parker has to say and which guys that he likes in there that he likes to see develop.
Yeah, and I think listening is the big thing. And we didn't necessarily get into it with the Justin Sternad thing, but when you have recommendations from the quality special teams coaches that they have, Sean Payton and company will listen. His fan favorite is going to be Riley Moss as well. Yeah, it might be the hair, might be the attitude, but that is a significant player that the Broncos gave up draft capital for. And Sean Payton, hey, you got to love him when he sees somebody or you reckon, I want to get this guy. Like, okay, they wanted to get Riley Moss, and he's buried on the depth chart. But that gives you faith in the future look of this secondary as well. With Pat Surtain as your cornerstone, and you got a young guy like Riley Moss on the come up. Might not do much this year, but it's going to be fun to watch his development.
It will be, and I think they're going to try to figure out where his home is as well, with an eye toward eventually a long-term corner, but. Maybe we're talking about him also being one of those rover types of backs that you use as a corner, you use as safety. There could be a role for him as your dime back this year if he steps up. But I think as we're doing this show, it's telling to me that based on what we saw, we're talking a lot more about Ja'Quan McMillian than Riley Moss.
Right.
And that's just because of how they were used and what they were doing. I think Moss is going to have to gain some confidence. Certainly that physically, in terms of speed, there are no issues there. Technique is something that I think he's going to have to work on, especially if he's going to end up being somebody that you end up counting on that side opposite Pat Surtain. I think he's a little bit of a ways off there, and there are others ahead of him. But I think with Moss, they'll find a way to use him. It just may not be snug in one specific spot right away, unless he can lock down that dime spot, which will get if he plays the dime, that'll get him out there 10 to 20% of the snaps, and I think that would be a good launching point for him. But we'll get into safeties, talk about some of the guys he's going to have to beat out for that.
Right, and the thing with Riley Moss, how many times would we talk about a young Broncos corner that was drafted that had to play? Well, they got to play this rookie and whatever. Like, you don't really with Moss. It's a great problem to have. And I think it's great for Moss's development. I asked him at rookie minicamp when we had open locker room. I was like, they're going to work you at safety? And he's like, well, I haven't done anything there yet, but I'm open to it. So.
And the funny thing is he did say when we asked him after he was drafted what the Broncos told him his position was going to be, and I think he had the response defensive back. So they're looking at him as something of a hybrid, and because of that, that may mean that finding that specific role does take a little bit of time. And so that's why if people look out there and they see Ja'Quan McMillian playing more than Riley Moss, and you see Damari Mathis playing more than Riley Moss, even though Mathis was a 4th rounder last year, Moss 3rd rounder this year, don't worry about that. Don't hold that against Riley Moss as well. Riley Moss may just well be on a little bit of a unicorn type of track compared to some of those other those guys that we're talking about who are more purely cornerbacks. So just, as you'd say, light and sweet. Just take it easy. Don't worry. He's going to develop. I think you're going to see some good stuff out of him over time. But this year may not be the big year for Riley Moss.
Yeah, don't be a Karate Kid, right? Because you just have to have patience. Like, why am I waxing a car? Why am I painting a fence? Like, just be patient. It all come together with
Sand
Riley
the
Moss.
floor.
Yes. You wax on, wax off. Be patient. Yeah.
Not wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. Pat Morita was brilliant in that. I love how he mocks him, like, not wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. So decisive.
Yeah.
And then you get it. And then Daniel gets it. And then you as the watching in the audience get it as well. It's that moment of clarity that you love to have sometimes. So
yeah, you love that.
So as we get down the depth chart here,
Art Green's going to make this team. He might make it. We talk about Thomas Incoom, Jaleel McLaughlin, Art Green, the big corner from Houston. I like. We got to talk about Tremont Smith and his special teams ability.
Yep.
Again, you have a nice collection of corners.
You do. And then you got Fayon Hicks and Isang Bassi that are battling for the slot corner spot behind K'Wan Williams, and that's interesting and notable because whoever is the backup at the slot corner is probably going to end up playing extensively at some point because K'Wan's reached the point in his career, and we saw it last year. Injuries are going to cost him a few games over the course of the season. So as a result of that, as a result of that, that's what, that's something to keep your eye on. Fayon Hicks, I thought, had some promise out there in OTAs. He's saying Bassi just seems like they can't get rid of him. They keep bringing him back, and then we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes from there. And Tremont Smith, a player that I don't want to put it in pen because it's, training camp preseason, but because of his special teams ability, because they went out and get him in free agency, it's like, okay, there's a vision. Sean Payton always talks about that, right? There's a vision for Tremont Smith, and it's making this team, my opinion.
Yeah. And again, core special teamer, and they brought him in to be a core special teamer. And so does that mean he steals a spot from somebody else potentially? Right. I mean, the back end, the back 10 to 15 spots on this roster, Ben Katwika and Mike Westhoff and Chris Banjo are probably going to have more say on that than anybody else on the coaching staff. So, but that being said, they won't have total say. Westhoff and I were chatting a couple of weeks back, and he mentioned that he has an idea who he wants, but may not be everybody who's on the roster because he knows how this game works. If you go out to training camp, take note of who the first teamers are on punt rush, on punt protection, on kickoff, and then kickoff return. Though if you see some players on all three of those four, or the four phasers on all four of them, you have a pretty good idea that they're going to be tough to dislodge on the roster. And so even though they may not be as high up as some others on their offensive or defensive spot, give them close notice because they're going to find a way to stick.
Super, super quick. The Art Green thing, I said 53 potential, maybe more practice squad. Your thoughts on the undrafted corners? Got some good size.
I mean, I love Art Green's length and range. Again,
it's going to be tough.
It's the roster calculus. If you, I'll tell you what, Art Green needs to make a play on special teams, either in a full pad practice or in a preseason game, and he needs to be a consistent plus player on special teams. And if he does that, then I think he's going to stick to a roster spot. I'd say also, as much as we like Ja'Quan McMillian, do something on special teams, baby. If you do that, you're going to be golden for the 53. And not only a 53, you're going to get a jersey every Sunday. They're not going to deactivate you. So, I mean, I sound like a broken record. Special teams. You get beyond the starters, that's your path to the roster. And it's so wide open at some of these positions on the roster this year. New coaching staff, new set of eyes evaluating everything, and a stated increased emphasis on teams that's your path to the roster. And look, if you don't have a chance to make plays on defense, make them on teams, baby. Hey, ask Terrell Davis on the offensive side about that. He was languishing on the depth chart. He made a play on teams, got everybody noticed, and it launched the hall. Look, they should show. The Broncos should show the film of TD making the hit on the kickoff in Tokyo in 1995 every year at camp.
Poor Tyrone Drakeford got blown up.
Yeah. Just always show those.
Yep. All right. That is a wrap for the cornerback position. It is our position training camp previews here on Orange and Blue today. We are presented by Champ Honda. He is Andrew Mason. I'm Cecil Lammey. Many thanks to you all for watching. Stay tuned. And always, would you please go ahead and stay frosty.